So the idea is the narrator is reflecting on an ideal time, an idealized time from their childhood. And during this time, his parents had dinner parties. So, he took a lot of comfort from these dinner parties. And so, I'm thinking the video would be something like, the main scene is me under a blanket or something like that. Kind of eternal sunshine of the spotless mind when Joel is thinking about his childhood. Except, well, yeah, it's very similar. I mean, it'd be me now. Maybe in childlike striped pajamas. It's damn right, Q. I got them all. I'm flexing on the cameras tonight. Now, if you allow me to get back into character. And Liam, I'm sorry that you have COVID. I hope you feel better soon. So, that would be the main scene. And there'd also be a narrator voice that breaks, that's speaking almost like the narrator voice is the viewer speaking to the one with the nose. What a fucking profile I was cursed with. I've learned not to hate it, but wow. When I was younger, I wanted a nose job so bad. Anyway, enough of my insecurities. So the narrator is speaking to me, the video creator, but also the person recounting his past as a child while still me, but dressed as a child under a blanket. So for the majority of the video, it is moi. That's French, by the way. That's French. That's French for me. So the majority of the video is moi talking about a bygone era. A bygone era. When I used to feel completely safe and secure inside what is referred to as like the moat of the sort of collective group of adults that were part of family. But then I recalled one dinner party in particular that I recall. And at this dinner party, good evening, everybody. And at this dinner party, I've learned that I can go to the air vent, put my ear to the vent, and once I do that, I can hear into the butler's pantry. Not just like the hubbub of voices where I can't understand what's being said, but through this sort of cups on a string device, I can hear exactly what's being said, but only in the butler's pantry. So I can't really hear the whole party, and not many people go into the butler's pantry. And then I noticed that I was just convinced, this is an aside, I was just convinced, it didn't take much convincing really, by a friend to watch Fleabag. So I know the priest you're speaking of. I'm not sure why this shirt reminds you of that. But wow, that was good. I enjoyed that show. So, we got the premise. It's supposed to be dark. We got the premise. Where I want to go eventually is sort of invasion of the body snatchers, where at this one party, the boy who is akin to Grover's monster at the end of this book, being implored by the narrator, who is essentially speaking from the camera to me, imploring me not to listen at the vent, imploring me or letting me know that I'm safe and that I don't need to worry, and that I should embrace the cocooned comfort that I'm feeling in my stomach. Yes, Indigo, I'm reading the chat. I'm trying to stay on topic and stay in, this is a different channel we're on here, so I'm trying to keep it ASMR-y, which means there won't be any interviews, won't be any guests. As calming as your presence is, Indigo. Anyway, the voice is imploring me not to worry about what's going on. But of course, what has happened has already happened, right? Can't change what has happened, so it continues and continues. And I recall hearing people in the butler's pantry talking about it being my mother's turn that night. Now your mind might go to eyes wide shut at the mention of that, but that's not where it goes. You can think whatever you like, but that's not where it goes. So at this first party, I overhear via this vent that it is the mother's turn. I hear someone saying, "Will the child notice?" And they say, "Of course the child won't notice." And children never notice. Little do they know, or so I think, that I'm listening at the vent. So the next morning, I go into my parents' bedroom, wondering how much of what I just experienced the previous evening is a dream, and how much of it is real. Yeah, I'm reading. I'm just not always responding. So I go into my parents' room, and they're asleep, but I notice my mother and father have switched sides. My mother is sleeping on the side that my father usually sleeps on. voice speaking to me from the camera assures me that this is not a big deal, that perhaps my mother went to sleep early, perhaps I dreamed a lot of it, and it was just convenience that caused them to switch sides for that one night. Point is, the voice is asking me not to bring the subject up with my parents. So instead, I just observe, seeing what's different about my mother, if everything. And there's one thing that's different. She's quit smoking. And there's not much of a deal made of it. She just quit. Oh dear. There was I appreciate, I'm not seeing what the mods had to take care of, but thank you very much, mods. I appreciate that. So, the mother's quit smoking. And apart from that, I don't really notice much of a change. The voice is suggesting that a lot of what I thought I heard or thought I saw was a dream, is imploring me to relax. Telling me not to think about it. And then there are a few more dinner parties that happen not at my parents' house, where I am left with a babysitter. Oh, this is annoying. I don't think I can. Oh, I can. Brad is banned. So that goes on for a little while longer. I'm forced to deal with this babysitter whom I don't like. Let's see. When I woke up the next morning, I could distinctly remember sitting on my bed, the sunlight streaming through the windows. Well, I mean, I can ban all day. some reason it's... Wow, this person is prolific. YouTube is lovely. I missed posting to this channel, so I don't give a fuck what used to be a symbol of. But anyway, so I've been perhaps this is someone I was arguing with on Twitter about Elon Musk being a piece of shit. Right. Alan Wake, I think that'll happen. Thank you, Q. I appreciate that. Man, even Nostradamus. All right, I'm gonna stop acknowledging. So there's time spent with a babysitter, right? He doesn't like the babysitter. He's not comforted by the babysitter. Let's see. I mean, he wants to be protected, right? He doesn't see the babysitter as an effective protector. Let's see. I'm sorry, Indigo. The feeling is that a sitter is a poor substitute, an untrained mercenary. And what good would a sitter be if there were an enemy at the gate? I need a large group of adults. I needed their merriment to reassure me, not the snide jibes of a girl not that much older than I was. What was worse was, in those cases, I couldn't even go to see my parents. If I had a nightmare, it wouldn't do any good. The odds are they wouldn't even have been home yet. And even in this context, I'm told by the voice, which is the camera, that I was safe even then. And the party comes back around, and it is my parents' turn to host it once again. Now the setup is to make the viewer think that the next person that's going to be called will be me. I like this. This is correct. If you're not doing something to cope with the horrors of reality, what are you going to do? So I'm trying to lead the viewer down this path of thinking that, okay, well, I'm going to go to the closet, put my ear to the vent, and hear my own name being called out. That's the misdirection, I suppose. But I guess the twist would be that his name doesn't get called, and never gets called, and he never brings it up with his mother, at least not in any sort of immediate time frame. And when he finally does bring it up with her, she's much older. Now this is where maybe there would be a change in scenery. Perhaps I would not be under a blanket anymore, be more in my actual milieu. And at this stage in my life, bringing it up more as a joke. I don't really think there's anything that was going on at those parties. I feel like it's a sort of nebulous childhood dream. And to my surprise, when I bring it up, my mother, who is now old, infirm, her disposition changes significantly and says something along the lines of, well, yeah, you were the first one replaced. And the reveal, if it could be called a reveal, is the voice speaking from the camera is the original me, and the me who is speaking to the camera is the body snatched me, the doppelganger. So that's sort of the general idea, and I have some of it written already. I expect it to be an enormous success. I'm looking into hiring a certain professional oh no. English but living in Scotland? Scottish? Irish? Irish. A certain voice actor. Maybe to do the camera voice. The voice coming from camera. Anyway, it would just be this sort of plodding sense of dread going through it. You should not be in shot. Here's a bit of what I have. I mean, I have quite a bit. I've read some of it on a different channel. I'll edit as I go. Man reflecting on ideal time from childhood when parents had dinner parties, talking to camera as a talking head, switches to a scene with him talking from under a blanket or bedsheet. There is a narrator voice breaking into scene coming from the camera, and this would be reflected, I think, in the sound as well. Right? Like you would have a very sort of right in your face, center panned, maybe with an expander. So that it really sounds like it's coming from inside your head if you're using headphones. And then, of course, I want to really get the sound effects of a dinner party in process right, So it becomes clear people are being replaced. You're not really sure exactly what's happening. It's strongly implied that people are being replaced. A la Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The man remembers wherein he would be replaced. And at the end, narrator reveals. I think I said the mother reveals this, but I think it would be the narrator who reveals that the man was replaced before even realizing replacements were going on, and thus the narrator is the original man. Right, exactly. Okay. I think that's better. I think that makes more sense. So the first party, it's so comforting. I know they're safe, my protectors. I can hear them enjoying themselves, happy, and that makes me happy vicariously. I feel and take on some of their embracing of life. They're enjoying simple pleasures, even though I don't quite understand all of them. Clinking glasses, chuckling, periods of low, hushed voices telling stories, followed by raucous laughter. You're safe. You don't even need to think about it. You can relax. Time slows. You are safe. Almost always this was the case, excluding that one night. And then it's first person. I knew parts of it had to be a dream, but didn't know what parts. What parts? Whoops. It all seemed equally real or unreal. Yet I knew at least some of it was true from the events of the next day. But of course, did that actually mean all of it was real? Could I have mixed up things that happened in a dream with things that actually happened, muddying the borders between truth and fiction? ... Could all of it have been true? No. Couldn't all have been true. No way. I repeated that to myself over and over. I must have fallen asleep at some point, maybe woke up, or only partly woke up, and incorporated things out of context? Or maybe I redreamed. Some of the things I heard while I was awake more closely knitting together the experiences into something my still developing brain could digest a little easier. You can relax. That's the camera voice, of course. So what did I know for a fact to be true? I knew it was a dinner party. I knew the rules. I knew I wasn't supposed to come out of my room except to go to the bathroom. And I definitely wasn't supposed to go downstairs. I had broken that rule once before. Following a nightmare. It wasn't a big deal, but I didn't like being stared at. So the rule seemed as much for my benefit as for Mom and Dad. So at this point, the boy has already been placed, so maybe the reason that he's being stared at, maybe that's the reason. Maybe. could hear the voices, but not really words, not usually. They overlapped. An orchestra of different frequencies. I could hear the punctuation of syllables, booming bass, and sibilants all together. I remember wondering how they could talk for so long. There were no awkward silences. It felt like if you got enough adults in a room and some wine, you could reach a critical communication mass and achieve some sort of perpetual motion. That motion being the flapping of gums. So it felt like if you got enough adults in a room and some wine, of course, you could reach a critical communication mass and achieve some sort of perpetual motion, that motion being the flapping of gums. Sure, it's okay. I'll come back to it. But that's a little unfair. It sounds harsh. As I said, I found these parties comforting. In truth, I loved them. And normally, I didn't hesitate to retreat deeply into that comfort. It was very primal. Like stories told around a fire in a cave. I felt enveloped, surrounded in a custodial way. And then again, you're safe. Don't think about it. Also, as I had mentioned, I had nightmares. Recurrent nightmares. I was not a good sleeper. Sometimes the nightmares were so intense that my mother had to sit in my room until I nodded off. That is true. I had a recurring nightmare when I was a child. It was so bad, it actually is what started me being in therapy. And it just kept coming back. It would not go away. Old Man, however, very much the intention is to kind of recreate a little bit of that thresher. So I would go into my parents' room and I would just say, and it was a question. I would say, "Sitter?" And my parents would bargain with me. Sometimes they would do it, right? And sometimes they would say, "Well, how about a checker?" A sitter, you can guess what a sitter was. They would sit in the room with me until I fell asleep. A checker would come by every 10 or 15 minutes or so and just say, "Checker," and then walk back to their bedroom. there's a setup for a sort of horror story in that, like just the idea of a silhouetted figure you assume to be one of your parents coming to your door and whispering checker. I don't know. Could take quite a turn. Hey, you. You can't go there. All right. Sometimes the nightmares were so intense my mother had to sit in my room until I nodded off. And if I woke up again, I would run into my parents' room and sleep at the foot of their bed. But apart from one instance, that was never a problem on dinner party nights. It was almost always a problem on dinner party nights that took place in the homes of other parents. A sitter was a poor substitute. What good is a sitter, an untrained mercenary, if there were an enemy at the gate? I needed a large group of adults, needed their merriment to reassure me. I'm repeating myself here, but not the snide jibes of a girl not much older than I was. What was worse was that in those cases, I couldn't even go to my parents' bedroom if I had a nightmare. It didn't do any good. Odds are they wouldn't have been home yet. And the voice again. You were safe then, too. I'd have to pretend to want a glass of water or some milk just to have some human contact with the sitter. Even though that contact was always exasperated. Always exasperated. As if she took her job title literally. Anytime she had to do anything other than sitting, it was an egregious breach of the unstated terms of her contract. No. She would not be much of a protector. She barely qualified as company. So, what else do I remember that night? I remember my parents argued about the guest list. I knew there were people My mother wanted in attendance, that my father would just as soon never see again. And I knew when this contentious couple arrived. I knew when this contentious couple arrived because Dad came up the stairs to the master bathroom, take some pills or splash water on his face, probably both. And I knew this couple by their voices. The man had a clipped, higher-pitched voice, and his wife, I assume wife, had a lower, less defined voice, like she moved her lips when she talked, but never parted her teeth. My bedroom was directly above the dining room. This meant that for most of the night I could hear the goings-on, muted but present. Quite recently I'd noticed if I went into the closet and put my ear to the vent near the floor, I could hear directly into the butler's pantry. And it was only by a quirk of fate that I had made this discovery, but from time to time, if I wasn't too tired, I would go into the closet, lay with my head on the vent, and listen. Again, the voice. This was foolish. You were safe. Now that I might have written that bit earlier, before deciding on the ultimate direction. Might have to change that. The few conversations I did overhear in this manner were for the most part of no interest to me. The butler's pantry was where food was placed prior to it being brought into the dining room, so the only people generally in there were my parents. Maybe a friend of my mother's helping out, or rarely, if they hired outside help for the evening, servers. These things were either historically true or true specifically on that night. But there is where I find myself drawing the line on what I could say with certainty was reality versus what may have been dream. had to admit this much, although I would have thought all of it reality, were it not for the ludicrous nature of the events. The party was proceeding as it typically did as far as I could tell. The unwelcome couple blended with the pack, presumably only my father seething internally at their presence. And as the evening went on, I could imagine even his annoyance fading away further with every drink. Or just fading away. I don't think I need that further. Do I? With every drink, I myself was fading in and out. On my bed, bathed in that familiar security. Happy just to be alive. He wrote, "I'm broke. Please send for me." At some point, a voice slightly louder and more authoritative than the others, it may have been my father, but I couldn't be sure, said something that made the other voices stop momentarily before resuming in what felt something like agreement. And what felt to be I then heard the partygoers start to exit the dining room onto the back patio. This was a frequent occurrence after dinner when the Vox Populi decided it was time for a cigar or a cigarette. Occasionally when this happened, one or two of the guests would remain behind, or I would hear my mother or a server removing plates. That didn't seem to be the case on this night, and it was Clement, so it made sense that even those who did not smoke were inclined to step outside for some fresh air. Of course, at this point, the mother character still smokes. Once the patio doors closed, the voices seemed much further away. The low-end frequencies had little luck penetrating the outer walls of our house. Our house. A few moments later, I heard the patio door open and close again, and then moments after that, I heard what was distinctly the sound of voices in the butler's pantry. Normally, I would not make much of this, but there were no servers this evening, which meant that so even if that meant my mother and a friend were clearing up dishes or preparing a new one, I had some small interest in hearing what was being said. So, as I had done before, I opened my closet door quietly and lay my head next to the floor vent. What I heard, or think I heard, was two voices. Neither was my mother. They were both men. One of them might have been my father, But as they were speaking in whispers, it was difficult to tell. What they said puzzled me, made me question if this part of my memory had crossed into a fictional reconstruction. One voice. Tonight it will be Rebecca. Rebecca, of course. A nod to Daphne du Maurier. It was a question. Rebecca was my mother's name. Another voice. I'd rather not. The first voice. It's already decided, it has been for some time. The other voice, louder than a whisper now, replied, I'm not sure. It was at this point I was fairly sure the second voice was my father's. The first voice, well, yes, you'll know a difference because you know, but if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. Surely you understand. My father. And this is for the first voice. We don't make any decisions about time. You're acting like you're not familiar with this process. Like this is the first time, my father. First time for Rebecca. First voice, well, that's not for us to determine or to judge. Keep things mum. No one will know the difference. And she'll be back before you know it. I remember wondering what keep things mum meant. My father's voice. You don't think my son will notice? The hair on the back of my neck stood on end at the mention of me, even though it was not by name. I didn't like the tenor of this conversation, was wishing I had just fallen asleep. The first voice, of course not, let's get back. We've already been away too long. Don't look glum. I didn't know what to make of this. One of the reasons I thought it might be a dream was the fact that I didn't run downstairs at that exact moment, screaming for my mother, begging her not to go anywhere. What were they talking about? In what world could I possibly not notice my mother going away? There has to be some rationale here for why, why a child at this age wouldn't have just run downstairs or run to his mother. Something like, do you ever look back on something you did and have no idea what led you to do it? You simply cannot believe your brain would have allowed you to take the action you did. This was one of those times. There is simply no way I would have heard what I heard and just gone back to sleep. And yet, that is exactly what I did. Did that answer your question? Now here I have the camera voice coming back in, saying, I was trying to save you from yourself. We, us, here in this context, we know what that voice means. A first-time viewer, listener, might be more confused, but that's fine, I think, at this point. When I woke up the next morning, I can distinctly remember sitting on my bed, the sunlight streaming through my window onto my crossed legs. I wanted what I remembered to be a nightmare, but if it had been a nightmare, I would have gone into my parents' room, and my mother would have carried me back to my room, and I would have woken up when she did. I had no memory of this, so either I didn't go into my parents' room, which meant the previous night had not been a nightmare, or my mom? I should be mom. Or my mom managed to carry me back into my room without rousing me. This would have been unprecedented. Clearly I was unsettled. Part of me wanted to climb under the covers and not come out. A curiosity, maybe curiosity and concern soon got the better of me. I mean, come on. He had to see his mom. That's makes perfect sense. What else could he do at that point? Got out of bed, walked down the hallway with the creaky wooden floors towards my parents' room. I knew if you walked near either wall, you got fewer creaks. But I wasn't really concerned about making noise. The morning after a party, my parents were usually slow to rouse. But even then, my mother would have been up around this time. My mother told me she loved me, stroked my hair, curled the furled end of my lock. I like that. I peeked into their bedroom, saw them both sound asleep. I closed the door and sighed in momentary relief. But something, that old trope, something made him? No, made me. Why does it say him? Made me open the door again for a second look. And then I noticed they had switched sides. My mother was always on the left side of the bed, my dad on the right. Not this morning. I approached my mom with more wariness than was typical. Maybe he should call her mother from this point on. Lose the familiar mom and only use mother. Is that too much of a giveaway? Does that tip the hand too soon? I'm not sure. We'll try it. I approached my mother with more wariness than was typical. She was smacking her lips from time to time, rustling a bit. I could tell she was going to wake up, so I could tell she would wake up soon. And because of that, I didn't feel bad about shaking her arm gently. Her eyes flit open. She saw me, smiled, raised her elbows over her head and extended her arms in a stretch, whispering, "Morning, honey." I commented on the pedestrian yet notable change. No. No. That cannot be. There doesn't need to be anything there. Just what he says. You're on the wrong side. This is Dad's side. She looked around, raised her eyebrows, and shrugged. Oh, I must have come to bed before Dad did. I rolled over here and he decided not to wake me up when he came in. Sweet of him, really. With that, she patted the form of my father, gracefully swung her legs out of the bed as she stood up. She looked down at me, eyes wide, asked if I wanted breakfast. I did, and then the camera voice saying, "See, nothing wrong there. Anything that may or may not have happened didn't seem to have much effect. You should have just forgotten about it." In the weeks that followed that first party, I was hypervigilant. Was on the lookout for things about Mother that, like Mother. It's Mother now. It's not Mom anymore. That seemed off. And there were a few of them. She stopped smoking, for one thing. She didn't announce it. She didn't wean herself from it. She stopped cold turkey. No, let's get rid of that. She just stopped. And I suppose I should have been happy about that. My father certainly was. And after that first night, she went back to sleeping on her side of the bed. But the paranoiac in me thought that adjustment had likely been made because I called it out. Very subtle. So subtly there, implying that she is a mother thing. So she seemed basically the same. Okay. There were other parties my parents attended in those weeks at friends' houses, and that meant babysitters, which I was tired of, and yet, in a way, it was a relief. At least at first. Then I started to worry about what was happening at all these adult gatherings at other people's houses. I had no way to eavesdrop on them. And so who knew what was going on beyond the immediate domain of my senses? This is solipsism. I'm sure you all already know that. Beyond that, who knows how long this had been going on? And that's sort of a nod to the fact that it's been going on much longer than ooh, I like this. I like this. So, mother, after the change, but during the flashback, back to mom, when we're in more of the now, when I'm speaking to mom older, and I have just like sort of written all of this off as a dream. I like that. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that. Thank you. Or what it was even. Okay, beyond that, who knows how long this has been going on or what it was even. So then what needs to happen here? Well, the second party, right? So here's where we want to, or where I want to set up a misdirected twist. I could do that in a bunch of ways. Probably a good way to do that would be earlier for him to even say, like when they call out his mother's name, he could even voice a worry, like what if they had said my name or something like that, right? Like a couple of tips, maybe the annoying couple. I like that. So the annoying couple is gone for the second party. What happened to them is not really explained. Maybe they were replaced with less annoying versions of themselves, although that's not really consistent. But maybe there's the option for there to be changes, right? Like if this were a childless couple, this annoying couple, then maybe when they were replaced, there's no reason for them not to be made a little more amiable for the rest of their party-going companions. So maybe that could happen. But the annoying couple disappears. Either way, maybe we don't explain it. maybe there's an implication that when the party happened, that the replacement, maybe there's an implication that that it's always the hosts. Thank you, Remington Turner. Right? Maybe we can establish that. So it's always something like if that's kind of midsummery, I guess. That's kind of May Queenie, Wicker Man-y, I guess. But who cares? This is quite derivative. It's an ASMR video. It's not, it's not high art. But we could make it where the people hosting the party it's always one of them. So maybe you think it's either going to be the boy or the father. I don't think it should be either of them. I think maybe it could be a server or someone else who's like considered part of the household. I don't know. I'll have to think that through a little more. But so that party happens. Could it be the father? Could we have the father replaced? I don't know. I gotta dwell on that, I think, a little more. That's two major characters being replaced, and what are they gonna... Perhaps they only talk to replacements, so it would be the mother and someone else in the butler's pantry in the second party. And then, the implication could be that the father gets replaced. Maybe there's really no... Or maybe the child falls asleep and has no idea what happened at that second party at their house. Although we're also referring earlier on to like a bunch of parties happening at their house. So if we're gonna like create this rule that it's always the hosts, maybe that's not worth pursuing, actually. I feel like maybe that's locking us into a box that maybe we shouldn't get locked into, because the whole idea, or the original idea, is like this is supposed to be something comforting to the child, usually comforting to the child, these parties. So they've happened a bunch. He was probably replaced at one of the first ones. So I think it's probably better that we don't try and establish some kind of rule that at the party it's always the one of the hosts that gets replaced. I think that's probably for the best. But regardless, so the second party happens, and then we can allude to future parties, but essentially nothing as remarkable as the Rebecca moment happens at any of the other parties. And the protagonist or the faux-tagonist, the faux-tagonist, I like that, grows out of this. It's only a couple year window you have there. And then we would cut to the later scenes out of the bed. And in those out of the bed scenes, After the second party. And now, protagonist is speaking to the aged mother, now calling her mom, not mother anymore. Resumes calling her mom because it's been decades, right? So clearly he must have been mistaken. Resumes calling her mom. Finally, and it's brought up like a, hey, you know, maybe they're looking at some old photos. It's very casual. He certainly doesn't expect like this to be anything more. He expects his mother to basically reply, "Oh, that's ridiculous, dear. Like, what a silly thought." Or, "Well, you did have a vivid imagination when you were a boy." Something like that. But that's not what happens. Obviously. Or hopefully not obviously. Right? What actually happens is 76-year-old mom gets a look in her eye, becomes more sprightly, maybe even looks, well, no, not angry, because the son is already converted, maybe surprised. Maybe from the mother's point of view, the child always knew and was just kind of going along with it. Maybe it's something they weren't supposed to talk about. And then the narrator, the final words from the narrator could be something along the lines of sort of being ticked off at the protagonist, right? Here, the protagonist is going through the story worried about their fate, and it's actually the narrator who is existing in what? Like in this, like another zone. Yeah, I think that could work. I'm gonna have to workshop this some more. I think maybe do another one of these, but this was nice. Apart from the trolls in the beginning. Thanks for dropping by. Hope you have a good evening. And I'll see y'all soon.